1. So for context, my boyfriend, a 26-year-old male, and I, a 22-year-old female, have just moved into our first apartment together exactly 1 month ago. Everything was great for the first 2 weeks, but recently things have been disappearing from our apartment. The first item to go missing was a key fob. Upon moving in, the apartment complex provided us with a fob to get us into the parking lot across the street from the apartment complex. In order to park your car or have visitors park their car, you have to scan the fob to open the gate, which will give you access to the parking lot. The fob is also used to open the door to the apartment complex and also gives you access to the pool, gym, and mailroom. 2 weeks ago, I was coming back from running errands, and I used the fob to open the gate to park my car and to open the door to the apartment complex. When I got upstairs and went inside, I vividly remember placing it on the counter next to my purse and house keys. A few hours later, I was getting ready to leave the house to pick up my boyfriend from work, but when I reached for the fob, it was gone. At first, I thought I had dropped it on accident, but I vividly remember putting it on the counter. I checked the floor, in my purse, in the trash can, or in the hallway, but I could not find it anywhere. I ended up chalking it up as, oh, I probably dropped it outside, and someone most likely picked it up. I admit I was pretty upset about it because I ended up having to jump the gate to get into the parking lot, but I ended up getting over it. Fast forward a few days later to the second incident. I had some ultrasound pictures hanging up on the fridge. I'm 21 weeks pregnant, from my 12-week scan. I decided to take them down from the fridge because we would be having visitors over that didn't know what we were expecting. I decided to put the pictures in my folder where I keep all important paperwork for my doctor's appointments. A few days later, I ended up buying a frame for the photos. I went to get the pictures out of the folder, but they were not in the folder. I was shocked because, of course, I vividly remember putting them in the folder, but they were gone. I was so upset I started to cry and called my boyfriend to ask him if he moved them, or anything of the sorts, and he told me he didn't even know I had put them in the folder in the first place. This is when I started thinking that there could be a ghost in the apartment. 2 of the most recent incidents happened over this weekend, the first one being that my boyfriend's work headphones ended up outside on the balcony, when neither of us had gone out there due to the bad weather. The last incident happened this morning, when I was getting ready to leave for work and my house keys were gone. They are always hung up near the bar counter, and last night while tidying up the kitchen, I remember seeing them in the place they are supposed to be. This morning they are gone. I mentioned the incidents I stated above to my coworker, and they said, maybe you have someone breaking in. In all honesty, I would definitely prefer a ghost over an intruder, but I cannot seem to wrap my head around this. Is it a ghost or an intruder? 2. When I was a child, I had the encounter with a dark human-like figure with glowing red eyes. It got embedded in my memory so well I will never forget it. I have researched this phenomenon on the internet, and it seems I am not the only one who encountered this creature. It was a summer night, and in the part of the world where I come from, it was normal back then to sleep outside in some sort of summer verandas due to the heat. I was 4 years old. My parents were sleeping inside the house, whereas I had decided to stay that night with my grandpa in the veranda. Veranda was 3 or 4 meters away from the house, 2 beds next to each other in veranda facing the house entrance. Grandpa was deep asleep, and I was tossing and turning in bed, not able to sleep, and regretting my decision to sleep out, but being too scared of the dark to get up and go inside the house to my parents. I was so relieved when I saw my dad coming out of the house and walking to the left. I called him out loud enough to make sure he heard me, but not too loud to wake up Grandpa. He heard me and stopped walking and turned his face to me, and that's when my heart sunk into my feet. Since it was dark, all I could see was the outline of a person that I assumed was my dad, since it was too big and not feminine to be my mom. But when the figure heard my voice and turned to face me, I realized it was not my father. So it heard my voice turn towards me and froze for a couple of seconds before starting to walk toward me. Once it was coming closer, I could see it better. Despite being a human-like figure, 2 legs, 2 arms, head, etc., everything that resembles a normal adult human, it didn't have a face. Only 2 red glowing eyes. Its movements were very smooth, like human but not human at the same time. You know what I mean? It came close to my bed and just stood there looking at me for God knows how long, before coming even closer to the side of my bed and sitting in a squat position with arms resting on its lap. All this time I was frozen in shock and couldn't move. All I could do was look at it, scared and fascinated. He was looking at me and tilting his head from side to side as if studying me. It didn't try to scare me, didn't attempt to touch me. For all it's worth, when I look back at it now, I actually think it was trying not to scare me, and didn't do any sudden movements, moving slowly and smoothly instead. I think it was curious that I could see it. I think that because at first when I called my dad out, well, not my dad apparently, it turned to me as if it was a bit shocked and froze for a couple of seconds. I don't know how long it was sitting there and looking at me. I remember at some point I started sobbing and slightly shaking out of fear. Still couldn't move, though. It disappeared without a trace once my young uncle, who was living with us at the time, returned home late at night, probably from a party, and heard my sobs. I remember he was asking me what is wrong and why I am not asleep, and picked me up from bed. Once I was wrapped in his arms, I started hysterically crying, and cried non-stop for the next half hour or so, which freaked out both him and my parents, who couldn't understand what happened to me. To this day, I remember it as if it happened yesterday. I recently spoke to my mom about it, and she also still remembers it, though she said they didn't believe my story. I told her now that I didn't make it up, that it indeed happened. She freaked out a bit, and we discussed what the heck it could have been. We both think it's not something negative or demonic, since it didn't do any harm. So yeah, there's my story. Please let me know what you think, and if anything like that happened to you too. I would really like to know more about those creatures and what encounters with them could mean. 3. About 19 years ago, in my hometown in country New South Wales, I used to get driven to catch a bus from a town called Parks, about 1.5 hours from my hometown, to go visit my then boyfriend in another town several hours away. There were hills behind these farms that were silhouetted against the often bright night sky. We saw a big ball of light traveling down the hill parallel to our car, probably a couple of kilometers away, and we thought it was just a truck possibly driving along there, until we realized there wasn't a road there, and it was one light, not 2 like car headlights. And it wasn't a motorcycle. Just because there wasn't a road there didn't mean it wasn't a vehicle, though. But it moved so smoothly and quickly, and we just thought it was odd. We didn't really think much about it until a few weeks later we were doing the same drive late at night, possibly a bit after midnight, and we saw the same light in the same area moving quickly and smoothly again. This time, Dad decided to stop the car and turn off the engine. When he did, that light came down the hill and hurtling towards us, across the farm fields and over the fence that divided the farms from the road. It was fast. The ball of light was probably about 2 meters off the ground and had a diameter of around 1.5 meters. It was a gigantic, silent ball of light that kind of fluctuated and rotated as it moved. It slowed and hovered in the middle of the road behind our car, probably about 50 meters behind us. I got so scared, but Dad was fascinated, watching it inquisitively. I was panicking and yelling to start the car and drive. I'm not sure what happened after that, because Dad turned the engine on and we started driving. We never saw that light again, but that was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen, and every now and again I mention it to my dad, just so I know that I'm not going crazy, and Dad always confirms every detail of it with me. I'm glad we were both there, otherwise I'd think I was going mad. I hadn't heard of Min-Min lights until years later. The things that people have described as Min-Min lights match exactly to what we saw. I'll never forget it. Has anyone else ever seen something like this in country New South Wales? I've read lots of stories of these lights in Queensland, but not New South Wales. 4. The store I work at is in an old building, like mid-1800s old, in New England. The store is honestly just a cute toy store, but employees have had plenty of spooky experiences. Although nothing we have on camera, since only the owner can review the footage. We just watch the cameras from the desk. Nobody had any experiences for almost a year until about a month and a half ago. My manager had a couple of odd things happen. I won't get into that, though, since that's not what I want to talk about here. Today, the store has been pretty quiet. It started raining and I was getting some things from our stockroom in the basement. But I had a weird feeling, so I came back up pretty quickly. On my way to the front desk, the phone started ringing. As I got closer, I could see a small light moving around on the basement camera. To clarify, we have 2 basements. One was built more recently, mid-1900s, unsure exactly when, and one is the original foundation. I was in the new basement. The camera is in the old basement, so we can see if it floods when it rains, which happens fairly often. The light on the old basement camera zipped around very quickly, like a small dot of light that would streak in one direction, then come back in a different way. Watching the camera and the strange light moving around, I answered the phone. Before I could say my normal greeting, I heard a low, screeching machine noise, kind of like a dial-up sound. Admittedly, I'm just a bit too young to know what dial-up sounds like exactly, but I hope that conveys a type of sound. Both things happening at once really freaked me out, but I was in a stupor more than anything. I hung up the phone and ended up calling my boyfriend while I described the light to him. He asked if I could get a video of it, but my phone wouldn't record while on call and it had stopped coming through the camera's view as often, so I couldn't be sure when or if it would come back. I ended up watching the camera, as every 15 to 30 seconds a small orb would go past, and then be gone again. I hung up and stopped watching when someone came into the store and I had to talk to them. For extra explanation, the basement camera is on black and white night vision since the lights are off down there. The light looked like a very small orb streaking through different areas. I've seen a spider web on a camera before, but this had a different appearance. It moved too fast and was a single glint of light at a time, whereas a web looks like a line that has multiple glares along it. Also, my manager and a previous co-worker have both seen a spirit orb down there. They say it would move through the doorways visible in the old basement, as if walking in a circle around the basement. There's 3 rooms down there. Honestly, I'm looking for this to get debunked. Why would a phone call sound like that? I tried to look this up, but I only saw forums about placing a call and getting sounds like a fax machine, not receiving one like that. I looked at videos of orbs and spider webs, but they didn't quite look the same. I'm sorry I didn't get any video. If it happens again, I will try to shake myself enough to film, but honestly, I hope it doesn't happen again. I have to work in the basement, and I hate getting spooked too much to do work. 5. These experiences are so profound that I'd imagine it isn't uncommon for people to remember their experiences in very accurate, chronological fashion. I can say for certain that if it weren't for my experiences as a child and teen, that I'd probably be making fun of a lot of posts on the paranormal subreddit and saying, "You are all crazy." I'm glad that isn't the case, as I'd like to take the time to outline my experiences in hopes that someone else finds similarities in my experiences. It is a fascinating subject, after all. My very first experience happened when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I used to live in this cute little house in a very close-knit community and neighborhood up in Massachusetts. It was a modest house with an upstairs, ground floor, and cellar areas. Immediately upon walking through the front door, the living room was to your right, the kitchen to your left, and the staircase was directly to your front. At the top of the stairs there were 2 rooms to the left and right, which were my room on the right and my parents' room to the left. I don't remember much about my parents' room, but mine felt humongous as a child. There were a lot of interesting things about my room, but one of the most interesting things about it was the closet. I was unaware, but there was a door at the top of my closet that went up into an attic-themed sort of bedroom above mine. The closet was very small, a typical one with a light bulb and a dangle string to turn it on and off, and a rod to hang clothes. Needless to say, the door was definitely oddly placed. My parents never used it, which is even more odd in retrospect, but anyway. My first experience, as you can probably guess, happened in my bedroom. I kept some of my toys in my closet, and I had pulled them out. It was a blue rectangular Lego bucket filled with miscellaneous toys and doohickeys, and of course Legos. I had also pulled out some pieces of paper, Play-Doh, and colored pencils. I was going ham with every toy and entertaining item I had. Well, anyway, my dad had been in the habit of drawing cubes at the time, and that had confounded my child's brain. I kept thinking, how in the world is he putting the pencil into the paper to draw the back part of the cube? So just imagine a little booger-nosed child sitting in front of an open closet with all his toys, Legos and snakes made out of Play-Doh, stabbing a piece of paper with a colored pencil, trying to draw the back of a cube. I was distracted by a noise in the closet, and upon looking up, noticed the little dangle switch for the light bulb was swaying back and forth. I thought absolutely nothing of it, and continued stabbing my paper. A couple moments later, another noise came from the closet, but this time the dangle was flailing back and forth like crazy. I thought to myself, adult stuff I don't understand, whatever, and continued on. I apparently was able to ignore that, tell me didn't give a fuck, without giving a second thought, and then the noise changed. I looked up again to see the string completely motionless, and it proceeded to pull down, over and over again, turning the light on and off. Then the door literally closed by itself. Never seen that before. Must be adult stuff. Whatever. What a mad lad I was. This is one of those experiences that give you extra goosebumps, because you only realize in hindsight that, hey, that was not supposed to happen. The other experience I had in this room was around the same time frame, except that it was every night. I'm willing to concede that perhaps this was my childhood mind going wild before bedtime, and it could have been a persistent nightly hallucination? Doubtful, based on what I remember, but still. My bed was in the far corner of my room, from the bedroom door, and next to my bedroom door there was a window. I laid in my bed facing this window every night, and it was what I usually focused on as I fell asleep. The interesting thing that would happen was that a pale blue light would be in my window every night. It wasn't this brazenly bright, tangible light, mind you. I didn't have a Casper floating in my window. It was more accurately described as a mist. It was like it was there, but also it wasn't. Almost like when you're in the dark and look at something long enough that it starts to change. But it obviously isn't changing. Hard to articulate. Regardless, when I looked at the light, it became whatever I would think about. I loved the Iron Giant movie, so that is what I consistently imagined. It would be the Iron Giant in the distance, but transparent and bluish. walking toward my house but never getting any closer. I'd watch this until I fell asleep for months. I don't recollect when it stopped, but it never seemed scary to me. Weird, right? My parents had their own experiences in the house, so there was definitely something going on. I might go over those as well at some point, but I want to focus on what I saw and heard directly with my own 2 eyes and ears. Fast forward roughly 10 years, and I'm about 13 or 14 years old. I'd moved to Virginia this time, but I had come back up to Massachusetts to visit my grandmother with my family for a holiday. She lived in an apartment complex, and her apartment was very cozy and decently sized. I had visited this place many times as a child because my parents needed a break from me and dropped me off with Grandma, and had never experienced anything weird, even in hindsight. Needless to say, when they asked me to take the couch in the living room at night, I thought nothing of it and agreed. There I was, in the pitch-black darkness, laying on the couch at 1 or 2 in the morning in my grandmother's apartment. I had my Game Boy SP, throwback, eh? With my Pokemon Emerald game inserted, and for those of you familiar with Pokemon, specifically Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, there is a Pokemon named Zigzagoon, with the ability pickup that allows him to be holding random goodies after a battle sometimes. You could get gold nuggets and rare candies in the beginning of the game in Ruby and Sapphire by using this method to farm them. But they had apparently nerfed this method in Emerald and made the loot level-based. So picture me on the couch slowly figuring this out on my own and becoming increasingly annoyed at Pokemon. It sort of randomly dawned on me that I was in the pitch-black darkness. I wasn't scared of the dark, but this thought came to me in a way that I can only describe as artificially. I normally wouldn't have cared, and I was more focused with farming resources in Pokemon. Immediately upon having this realization, I could hear something on the ceiling, and it was almost muffled. It sounded like a man constantly mumbling without pause. I sort of perk up and look up at the ceiling like, WTF is that? Bear in mind, it sounded like it was in the room with me, not a neighbor above. The sound began to get louder and the words became more discernible. They were my thoughts. Freaked out, I casually got under the covers while assuring myself I wasn't actually scared. I'm just cold and getting comfy. Now, when you hear that, they were my thoughts, what I mean is that whatever I thought this thing would recite it. It was like a mumbled whisper. If I thought the word dog, it would start saying, dog, 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 dog. And if I thought butthole, well, you get the idea. Under the blankets, I turned the volume on my Pokemon game to max and press it against my face, and fly my character to the battle frontier for the loudest music in the game. It didn't help. As a matter of fact, the voice descended down slowly from the ceiling, while it also became louder. When it got to the point where I definitely couldn't ignore it anymore, I just listened and grasped how it worked. My teenage mind immediately decided, ha! I can make it say fuck, I can make it say shit, I can make it say ass. So that's exactly what I did. I made it say the most outrageous things I could think of, and for about 30 seconds it was hilarious. Then it wasn't. It was right next to my head, and pretty much just as loud as a real man whispering next to me. The thing that really began to scare me was how relentless it was with its whispers. And as I got scared, my thoughts began to reflect that. As I said before, it recited my thoughts. What is that? Oh my god, it's right next to my head. What is that? Oh my god, what is that? That freaked me out into fight or flight mode, and I chose fight. I flipped my blanket off my head and launched a punch in the direction of the sound, and it immediately stopped. That was pretty much it for that situation, and it is the last time I ever experienced anything of that nature. I'm now 27 years old, so I'm starting to become a skeptic, but I'll never forget what I've experienced. I'm curious to hear all of you guys and your thoughts on these things. Any similar experiences? Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 345. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button. And if you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, I usually put them up on Monday or Tuesday at the latest, then you can support me through my Patreon, which is linked in the description. And you'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store where you can buy yourself some Hellfreezer merchandise. You can also make donations during streams or videos like this one. And you don't have to do this, but I do appreciate it, and it helps me out a bit. Okay. I don't think there's any other business. Sorry, I've recorded 5 videos today. My head's a little numb. No other business, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: can you watch movies based on true events, with the knowledge that you're watching essentially a work of fiction with maybe little bits of truth in it? I can do that sometimes depending on the situation. Like, for example, because somehow I feel that they should be completely true, warts and all, otherwise don't tell the story. But I have less trouble watching other movies, like horror movies even, which are based in big old quotes on a true story, like the Amityville Horror, based on a true story. Because there are elements of reality in there, but it's mostly fiction. Although, on the flip side of that, also horror movies somewhat loosely connected to Amityville. I'll never watch any of the Conjuring movies, because something about that creeps me out in a way that none of the ghosts in the movie actually do. It's more about the people involved. Okay. Let me know what you think. Let me know your opinions in a comment below. And I'm going to head off for now. I'm considering ice cream, but it might be a bit late for that. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.